Thank you for attending this session. Welcome to this session. I'm Masaki Morisawa. Actually came from Tokyo, Japan. I see some faces that look Japanese, so nice to meet you. Konnichiwa. And for those of you who came from other places, how many of you come from outside of Thailand? Okay, I see many hands raised up. So how do you say hello in Thai? Have you mastered that yet? Just testing you with my really low-level Thai. If you're a male, you say sawadee ka. If you're a lady, I think you're supposed to say sawadee ka. There you go. Okay, that was a little quiz. Another little quiz I wanted to give you is more about today's topic. Have you heard of the product name ECCO? ECCO. Anyone have any idea what ECCO is about? No? No? Have you heard of ECCO before? Okay, that's fine. You may have, oops, it's not working. You may have actually seen something like this. Actually, if you Google ECCO, this is actually the first thing that comes up in the search results. And I think it's a pretty good shoe brand. I think it's Danish or something, and they sell really comfortable shoes. But unfortunately, this is not our topic of today. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about historical archives. And ECCO is actually the acronym for 18th Century Collections Online. So you take the acronym and we call it ECCO. So this is a screenshot from ECCO. And you can notice a few things. So it's actually a scanning of a historical book here. And you would notice that the page is scanned in black and white. Okay, that's one important fact. And the other thing, you would notice that the word here, Siamese, which is sort of the old-fashioned way to refer to Thai, is highlighted in green. And you can see a lot of information about the book. You see the table of contents, you see the citation. So this is ECCO, basically. To describe it in a little bit more detail, ECCO is a collection, a digital collection that Gale released in 2003. And it's one of the pioneering digital primary source archives where we digitized historical books based on a catalog called the English Short Title Catalog, which in itself is called ESTC. So the ESTC lists practically all of the printed works that were published in England or its colonies or in English anywhere else. And there are many such works, and we have digitized so many of them. So when ECCO I, which is now called 1, came out in 2003, it became such a phenomenon that it was quickly followed by a supplement called ECCO II, which added additional titles to this database. So all in all, ECCO 1 and 2 contains about 33 million pages of books and pamphlets and documents, all scanned. And it has been a very successful database for us. ECCO has been acquired by more than 2,000 institutions worldwide, including 88 just in Asia. And especially if you're studying 18th century history, ECCO has really become an essential source. And one of the reasons ECCO became so popular is this functionality. So can you read this word? What does it say? Nagasaki, that's right. This is Nagasaki, the Japanese place name. But you would notice that the S is kind of a little bit weird. In the 18th century, this was called the long S, and the S was sometimes written like this. And what I wanted to show you is you could do a keyword search on the word Nagasaki, and ECCO would search all across all of those 33 million pages of 18th century books and pamphlets and find the exact mention of that word right in the middle of a book, right in the middle of a pamphlet. And this was really revolutionary for researchers because they could find unexpected mentions of a keyword across all of these historical documents. Okay? And actually, this is enabled by a technology called OCR, optical character recognition, which converts these printed images into searchable text. And actually, as a byproduct of that process, some scholars started to use that OCR-generated text, the text data itself, and started to do all kinds of interesting analyses. And we created another platform called the Gale Digital Scholar Lab for that. So, for example, you can look at 300 books from ECCO that are all about women or female studies, and tell the tool to map them into 6 different clusters. So each of these little dots are works, and it will show you how similar or how different the vocabulary is from all of those works. You can do this kind of thing as well using ECCO. So ECCO has had quite an enormous impact in historical studies, and we recently commissioned a study by this professor Mike Thelwall from the University of Sheffield, who looked at all of the citations of ECCO in all of these academic works and did an analysis. And it turned out that ECCO still continues to be used, right? Even though it's been like more than 20 years since the first module, or 16 years since the second module. The other thing they found out was, of course, it's used a lot in studies like the history, the humanities, but it's also used in areas like science, medicine, engineering. Whenever there's a historical angle to it, ECCO can also be used. But this year, we are releasing a Part 3 after a 16-year blank. And you might be asking, why? Why are you releasing ECCO Part 3 now? Wasn't ECCO Parts 1 and 2 pretty much complete? It wasn't exactly complete, and there are several reasons to that. So the first reason, I showed you that first screenshot, and it was in black and white, right? So ECCO 1 and 2 were digitized from microfilm. How many of you are familiar with microfilm? Okay. Yeah, it's sort of like a black and white photograph of all of those pages. And we scanned the film, so the resulting image was also black and white. And because the original was done many, many years ago using microfilm camera technologies, there were some limitations, and there were also some priorities involved. So for instance, the film project tended to avoid things like unusual formats, like this is a long page. It's difficult to capture using the old camera, or some of them are even too small, like this little tiny book that you see here. Or some things are more too delicate, like this hand-colored natural history illustration. These require really, really careful handling. Or some things were considered too trivial, like many of these anonymous pamphlets or broadsides that were just kind of poetry, pieces of poetry written on them that were read by the masses. During that time when we were doing the microfilm, the academic world thought it's more important to scan the famous authors' works or the famous works. We don't need to do these anonymous works outright. So there were priorities, and as a result, some of the works did not get included in the original microfilm. And of course, the original bibliography on which ECCO was based continued to expand. It continued to find and discover additional new works. So hence, this March 2026, we are releasing ECCO, 18th Century Collections Online, Part 3. So, Part 3 will contain over 34,000 titles, 1.7 million pages of additional material that was not previously included in ECCO 1 or 2. And different from Parts 1 and 2, this time we are scanning everything directly from the original. So this will be in full color scanning from the original documents. And just as I explained in the previous slide, this time we have the technology and the ability to include large or unusual formatted works, hand-colored, delicate works, and ephemeral material such as ballads, broadsides, and pamphlets. And we are also changing the way we scan things. In the previous microfilm, we would start scanning from page 1, and we wouldn't scan things like the covers or the spines because at the time they didn't think that was important. But now there is a lot of study about the book as an object. So we are also scanning covers, spines, end papers, and other physical attributes of the original work. And we are also conscious about gender studies. So when we release ECCO III in March, we will be adding a new author gender search limiter. So you can limit your search by male authors, female authors, or not sure authors as well. So that was really an important requirement by a lot of scholars. So just to give you a taste of ECCO III, let me show you some highlights using this screen. So as I mentioned this time, previously everything was based on microfilm, so it was black and white, and it was also very high contrast. This is the same illustration scanned in black and white and in full color. Although this is a monotone illustration, you can see the level of detail. Look at the flowers and everything is much, much more apparent. And this is really helpful for scholars who study the history of the book, who are looking where the same illustrations appear in different works and trying to recreate the printing process as a result. And of course, there are a lot more colorful things too. For example, these natural history works, moths and butterflies. And this particular work was a book about moths and butterflies in England, and it caught the fancy of our marketing team. So you see a lot of butterfly and moth imagery in a lot of the marketing material about ECCO III. And these can be really breathtaking. And also the platform itself has been improved. So you can now look at all of the pages in this thumbnail view, and we have also included blank pages. These used to be skipped, but now you can kind of recreate the original structure of the printed work and see it in its original context. There are also really unusual works. This is not a printing. This is actually a dried specimen of a plant. It's a fern, and it's kind of held in place by a thin layer of tracing paper. You can see the scanning process over there. It was impossible to touch this kind of work previously, but this is going to be included as well. And then we also have things like broadsides and pamphlets. So some of these are satirical. This is a big piece of paper, kind of like a poster, and it's poking fun at an economic crisis happening at the time. This one is satirical too. It says, this politician is a turncoat. He can change his opinions so easily, so you can turn this picture around, and it will still become a face. And then we have little ballads, like this was a ballad, an anonymous ballad of an actual crime. So it begins, good Christian people, all I pray a while to me draw near, and such a story I will tell, you never before did hear. So this is where, the balladeer would actually read to many, many people who may or may not be able to read. And they will tell a story, which was actually a gruesome story of a brother raping his sister and then killing her. So you can hear and read about the story. And this was kind of what tabloid journalism does today. But in these days, these kinds of crimes and sensational stories were often made into these anonymous ballads and passed into the working class that way. You can also read works by or about women. This one in the center is my personal favorite. the misogynian club exposed, or the haters of women lashed. So you can see all kinds of interesting different viewpoints from previously neglected voices, including those of women. And as I mentioned, we are now capturing things like the covers and spines, and a lot of these covers and spines were done by previous owners. So in the previous days, in the 18th century, the exterior of the book was not standardized, so every owner would have a different binding. And as the book changed hands, the new owner might give it a new binding. So I think these bindings are probably 19th century bindings, but it tells you a lot about the ownership. And speaking of ownership, you can also look at a lot of the annotations and scribblings on the pages. These were also present in ECCO 1 and 2, but in full color, you can really appreciate the handwriting and its original pen work. Some of them are kind of strange. This was an interesting example where the owner actually took this illustration from a later edition of the same work and cut it out and pasted it on an earlier edition. Why did they do that? That's another kind of intriguing question. So I discussed some large format titles, broadsides, various other physical aspects of the work. And then we have our personal favorite, which are tiny books. Sorry, that was too big. We should have written tiny books. So, like in places like the British Library, you can see these amazing tiny books, which are more like artifacts. You can look at the finger there, and that is not the book itself, that's the case in which the book was placed. Sorry? Oh, you can actually read them. I have another picture in the later slides. So this is another sheath, and this picture here, this book, I can enlarge this. And this was an almanac, so it was showing like a calendar. And if you look carefully, you need to turn it this way, but you would see the names of the kings and queens and what were their individual reigns and things like that. So it was like a kind of a tiny cheating book, if you will. And of course, scanning this requires really delicate care and attention that was not possible in the microfilm age. So there are other highlights about ECCO Part III. We have more than 1,500 works written by 676 female authors. So there's a lot on women's studies that you can do with ECCO Part III. We are also including a large number of single sheet works that are called broadsides, like that example I showed to you earlier, that cover a wide range of topics. More than 2,000 items unique to the British Library and to ECCO, and thousands of illustrated works, and also publications not just from England, but also from 32 different countries and more than 25 different languages. So it really broadens the scope of this project with ECCO Part III. So, to conclude, full color images and exterior shots like those spines and covers allow researchers to really study the physicality of the book, including the book's relationship with its previous owners and how that ownership passed on to different people. And anonymous ephemera like that ballad that I showed to you, or those broadsides that I showed to you, help expand the studies of readership, not just beyond the few elites, like the famous intellectuals of the time, but also among people like the working class, whose names are no longer known, or also the broad masses that read or learned or heard about these stories from people who could actually read. And also the inclusion of more female authors and the addition of gender filters to the database allow deeper examinations of suppressed voices, including those of women during the so-called era of enlightenment. So that is all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. If you would like to see a demo or would like to learn more about it or just want to have like some giveaways, please do visit our booth. Our booth is number 24, and thank you again for attending today.